The competitive realm is all about coverage, or moves that hit opposing Pokemon preferably super effectively that your stab moves would otherwise struggle against. It's why Hidden Power was a staple for so long. Despite its measly strength, it actually wound up hitting quite hard because of how much it hits super effectively. If you have a wide enough range of moves with which to attack the opponent, you'll be set to break through anything thrown at you, right? Well, it sounds good, but such assumptions are among those top players tend to take advantage of when schooling the less experienced. So today we're going to explore why even all the super effective hits available don't necessarily lead to the best strategy, or why super effective moves aren't everything, otherwise known as the Latios Theorem. You're a savvy Pokemon player. You learned long ago you can't just mash through everything with power alone. You know that Pokemon with unimpressive attacking stats can be among the most terrifying offensive threats to face depending on the moves they got in their arsenal. You pack the right array of super effective slams and you'll cut through defense more precisely and reliably than any stab Draco Meteor. That's right, coverage is key, and all the power in the world won't do you any good if your coverage is limited. You thud into an immunity or a quad resist, and if you can't handle it, you're out to lunch. So here's our starting point, which seems to run counter to how damage in Pokemon works, yet is critical to understand. A Pokemon may have super effective coverage against a key target, but that doesn't necessarily translate to offensive firepower, and just because you have the super effective coverage option doesn't make it worth using. We're not talking a case of low power for such coverage either, as that doesn't necessarily affect the result one way or another. For example, mixed Jirachi sets, prized for their super effective coverage so much that they're among the best users of Expert Belt, largely use medium to lower power coverage moves like Hidden Power and the Elemental Punches. And even the stronger moves like Thunderbolt or Dual Stabs are not only not that strong, they're coming from the quite plain base 100 attacking stats. Meanwhile, Garchomp and Flygon have base 80 special attack, yet have been known to effectively use Draco Meteor, even though the Pokemon they're trying to hit with aren't dragons, meaning it's not landing super effectively. So here's the other side of that, the inverse, our poster Pokemon, Latios. But before we talk about our poster boy Latios, increase your stats in coding thanks to this video sponsor, Boot.dev. Boot.dev is the smartest way to learn how to code Python and Go because it makes sure you're never bored while learning it. Look, coding is very useful to learn. In fact, programmers have amazing earning potential. According to Stack Overflow, the median salary for backend developers in the US in 2024 was over $100,000. But learning to program is super challenging and boring. There's a bunch of YouTube tutorials online if you want to pick it up, but you might end up in tutorial hell, as I often find myself in, which is basically when you watch a bunch of tutorials that just tell you about the programming language, but they aren't very hands-on at all. Luckily for you, Boot.dev has online courses that are self-paced and feel like a captivating RPG game instead of just a lecture. The platform is designed to get you to write a ton of code, because that is the best way to learn, building up that muscle memory just like any other competitive game. I've been trying to learn Python myself, and I have never felt more motivated than when I took a Boot.dev course. Boot.dev even has training grounds where you can take on the same exercise over and over until it's perfect, for you perfectionists out there. They are by far the most intuitive and addicting courses out there. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description box and use my code FSG to get 25% off your first month or even your entire first year if you choose the annual plan. And thank you so much to Boot.dev for sponsoring this video. Latios packs tremendous coverage, both in terms of type and the base power of the moves, and it's launching them from its frightening high special attack. Of course, Latios isn't exactly the kind of Pokemon that always needs coverage, given that it is the preeminent example of the Draco Meteor spammer that we alluded to earlier, who just mashes through everything off raw power alone. But even Latios does have issues with certain Pokemon that Meteor can't quite get by. And for those Pokemon it struggles with, it's not for a lack of coverage options. Name a Pokemon and Latios almost certainly has a move that strikes it for either super effective or significant damage. It's not hitting the fairy type Clefable super effectively, but its neutral stab psychic sure gets the job done. Latios even has the defense targeting Psy Shock for Chansey, and when Rain is in the picture, it effectively gains stab on the already excellent power and strength of Surf in its arsenal, putting major pressure on Draco Meteor resistant steals like Jirachi. Thunder and Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Grass Knot, sometimes even Earthquake, as seen on its Gen 7 Mega Evolution. The only hidden power Latios ever needs is Fire, and that's striking for enormous damage against a would-be answer in Ferrothorn. So why is it that Latios, which is truly left wanting for nothing, still comes up short against certain defensive targets? Well, just because it's super effective doesn't mean it's necessarily going to get the job done, even with Latios' power. The quintessential example, when it's not Draco Meteoring, Latios is generally spamming Surf, because it's strong into most steals, and of course Tyranitar. However, even though Tyranitar is actually weak to Surf, it's so bulky, it still doesn't at all mind switching directly into it. Yes, right into a super effective hit, no pivoting needed. It will still devour overpower several Surfs and beat Latios in the 1v1. T-Tar's Sandblasted special bulk makes it exceptional in this regard. Defensive sets will switch right into Heatran's Earth Power almost as happily as they will Fire Blast. They're so tanky, but it's far from the only case. Something like specially defensive Celesteela doesn't mind switching right into Hidden Power Fires from Tapu Lele, while Toxapex is known for actually switching into Rotom Wash, unperturbed by Volt Switch. Put simply, if you want a way around these walls, you're gonna need more than just the super effective meshes showing up after an attack. Now, in Latios' case, it's actually in luck, because Surf isn't as good as it gets for it against Tyranitar. That would be Grass Knot, which exerts much more pressure with significantly higher damage. Its minimum damage rolls cleanly outdamage Surf's maximum, and unlike Hidden Power Fighting, it won't end up doing nothing against T-Tar's requisite Chople Berry on the first hit, and doesn't prevent Latios from running its more desired Hidden Power Fire. It sounds about right. Latios should be running Grass Knot if it wants to get around Tyranitar, yet at this time, we would do well to remember the immortal words of Michael Scott. Well, it sounds right, but is it? It might very well not be, depending on a couple of factors. First, Pokemon tend to struggle to fit all the coverage they want on the same moveset, and even those offensive Pokemon that don't have to think about their 4 damage dealing attacks have this issue. Even the mighty Protean Greninja at the peak of its powers famously had issues including everything it wanted, and that's if it didn't want to use spikes. Latios itself can go the 4 attack route, but even so finds itself burdened by more useful coverage than it can fit. And while this sounds like a good problem to have, if you're going to commit yourself to attacking like this, you want this problem to be kept to a minimum. More crucially though, Latios is generally not a Pokemon you want to completely dedicate to all-out attacking, because part of why it's so good on offense is because of its naturally excellent defensive profile, which combined with its solid utility move pool means you're going to want to make use of it somehow. Even Choice Specs variants, which would seem most dedicated to power, always include Trick in their moveset, as do the Choice Scarfers. This is both utility and a form of offense, one that's actually more effective than its coverage moves at outright ruining would-be walls like Chansey and specially defensive Jirachi. Meanwhile, non-Specs or Scarf variants are going to lean into longevity to deal more damage, as well as Latios' natural hit-taking against key targets like Keldeo and Mega Charizard Y with Roost. And of course, in Gen 6, the Defog buff means Latios can potentially clear hazards for its teammates, making it even more difficult to justify a slot for coverage. That brings us to the second factor on whether or not Latios should run Grass Knot. Is it worth it against anything else? Sure, you can find more Pokemon Grass Knot hits, of course. It'll reliably crush Hippowdon, Jellicent, Gastrodon, Mamoswine, all without having to go -2 on Draco Meteor or risk missing for that matter. What's not to like? Well, extra damage against those Pokemon certainly is nice, and there's no denying that, but is it necessary? Far from it. It is a bonus, a good one, yet a bonus nevertheless. Grass Knot really is just for Tyranitar. Now, if a Pokemon is as scary as Latios, to the point where many teams without Pursuit Tar are considered Latios weak because it will just repeatedly switch in and out to Draco Bomb you until you succumb, then yes, using a move more or less for one target, its biggest target at that, can absolutely be worthwhile, sometimes even necessary. But in Latios' case, Grass Knot is definitely not the latter, and usually isn't the former either, because it already hits Tyranitar quite well with Surf and Draco Meteor, which usually outdamages Surf despite lacking the super effective hit. It's not like Grass Knot completely flips the matchup in Latios' favor, so instead you're left wondering if you couldn't be getting more out of that slot, especially if you can find other ways of getting around T-Tar, which is pretty much what Latios needs to do to succeed anyway. Additionally, when you compare it to Latios' other common coverage moves, you see how much more broadly useful they are. Surf synergizes so well with Draco and hits for such good damage overall, it's a solid move Latios generally leads off with to a solid effect, while the weaker HP Fire is more specialized but is hitting incredibly crucial targets much harder than its other options, and it thus cannot be easily replaced. And even though its coverage is huge and restricts the already limited counterplay to it even further, Latios doesn't fit it nearly as well as Surf, yet it is still far more useful than Grass Knot. This general idea extends much further than Latios, whose Grass Knot was basically an improvement on super effective coverage that it already had. Most Pokemon aren't so lucky. Many Pokemon would like to hit Fairy type super effectively, but the best they're getting is Iron Head or Poison Jab. Well, if that's what it takes, right? The problem is that these moves are low base power. If you're something like Hydreigon, with both stabs falling flat, then you'll make do, but if you have a neutral stab like Terrakion Stone Edge, you're probably better off using that, because these coverage options aren't that much stronger to justify the slot dedicated to them, since they're hitting almost nothing else of note super effectively either, unless your move pool is really that barren, but most of the time it won't be. This is especially true for Pokemon running choice sets. You really don't want to be dinking around with weak coverage options that don't also have wide super effective reach unless you absolutely have to, which you usually don't. Even Latios prefers not to run HP Fire on spec sets. Yes, the power is great, but it's also a move of much lower base power that makes it incredibly easy to switch around should it not hit its target. With non-choice choice sets, you can pivot something else into HP Fire and still not be safe because of the big looming Draco Meteor coming your way. Coverage tends to be king on movesets with great flexibility. If you're going to be locking into moves with a choice Pokemon, you really want to make those moves as broadly effective as possible. It's why you'll see a fair few choice Pokemon run 2 of the same stab, which is much rarer on non-choice Pokemon. They would most like to lock into this type of move, so they'd rather have different versions of it to optimize their good matchups, rather than going too specific. Such doubling up choice users are many, but notably include Draco Meteor and Dragon Pulse Latios, Hydro Pump and Surf or Scald Keldeo, Overheat and Flamethrower Heatran, Crunch and Pursuit Tyranitar, and Psychic and Psyshock Tapu Lele. There are also 2 Pokemon that embody this to the fullest, Weavile and Crawdon, as both run choice band sets with 2 of each stab. Weavile's Ice Shard and Icicle Crash alongside Knockoff and Pursuit, and Crawdon's Aqua Jet and Crabhammer alongside Knockoff and Crunch. Sometimes it's better to drop the super effective coverage, even if it means you won't be hitting the would-be target effectively anymore. Take the example of Gen 7 Kommo-o. It's got good power and coverage for days, yet it simply cannot threaten Clefable without Poison Jab or Iron Head, but Poison Jab is better since it also hits Tapu Fini and crushes Tapu Bulu. These are seriously important targets, especially for Dragon Dance Kommo-o, which is trying to sweep late game. It can't be so haplessly walled, can it? Yes, it's got other things it needs to try and cover, and not enough move slots to fit them in. But if it's going to be this stifled by so many Pokemon, is it even viable? This is crucial to identify because you start going crazy over cramming coverage on something that might not be worth the effort. But in this case, yes, Dragon Dance Kommo-o is a late game terror that will reward the right moveset. What the right moveset means is dependent on its team. Sometimes it will indeed want to run Poison Jab with Poisonium Z to bypass the lower base power and boost it into Acid Downpour that will really threaten its usual answers. But most of the time, Kommo-o is going to go with its standard of Close Combat, Ice Punch, and Earthquake, even though this set doesn't exactly do well into Clefable and Tapu Fini that are its most natural enemies. Not even trying to hit them hard outside of Groundium Z boosting Earthquake into Tectonic Rage against them at weakened HP ranges. More reliably though, and oftentimes the best thing to do, is to have your teammates take care of these crucial targets rather than tripping over yourself to try and get the right coverage to hit them. What this Dragon Dance Kommo-o variant does, and what is generally most advised to do, is to make it as good as possible at what it's supposed to be good at. Basically, lean into its strong points. Dragon Dance Kommo-o smashes up most of the metagame with these 3 attacks. Don't try to overextend its reach by cramping its moveset with extra coverage to get around a roadblock that it might not even need to face. Even if that coverage isn't bad, even if it's actually quite good, you're still holding Kommo-o back from functioning at its strongest. By doing that, you wind up limiting its effectiveness in those games where it would be at its strongest. It's an offensive version of the earlier example of wanting Latios to provide utility to make it its best overall. Those teammates that would become tasked with baiting in and taking out Kommo-o's roadblocks are examples of other options that wind up being superior choices in lieu of fitting in a super effective coverage option. But sometimes you don't need to outsource those non-coverage other options to your teammates either. Think back to the way that Specs Latios uses Trick to ruin Chansey more than any attack in its arsenal might. These kinds of utility options, the ones that go beyond the type chart. In the same way that Kyogre takes equivalent damage from Entry Hazards and Leech Seed as Infernape, such tactics often wind up being the most impactful for bypassing answers, and their greater universality means they are more generally useful than trying to force an over-specific coverage option that thuds into anything that isn't its exact target, no matter how useful hitting that target may be. In this vein, Latios can effectively dip into its move pool to similarly bypass even Tyranitar without the excessive specificity of Grass Knot. One option briefly toyed with was Roar, which hits a Tyranitar switching into hazards and immediately forces it out, racking up even more hazard damage and leaving T-Tar unable to safely switch into Latios any longer. Roar is also a much more generally useful move, in addition to similarly messing with other would-be walls like Ferrothorn, that you can use it to phase out Calm Mind Reuniclus, or to punish anything trying to set up on you like Quiver Dance Volcarona after you've gone to -2 special attack with Draco Meteor. Okay, Roar's not really your speed, that's fine, because Latios can also use something as simple yet as forgotten as Calm Mind, which really starts putting the pressure on everything. It's almost anti-coverage, as it's more about enabling your ability to Draco Meteor even Steel types into oblivion. Or you can even take it a step further. Sometimes you don't have to change your coverage to adapt to an answer, but your item. In Latios' case, who needs Grass Knot's extra power against Tyranitar when Cobra Berry lets you withstand the crunch from it, meaning you can safely trade blows with Tyranitar and come out on top? You don't have to change your moveset at all for this. Sometimes you don't even have to change anything at all. Simply using your Latios as bait to switch in a threat that capitalizes off of Tyranitar can be the way to go. Or double switching on Tyranitar until it's racked up enough hazard damage to not be able to switch in. Basically, Roar without Roar. These tactics are Latios specific, but the ideas can be extended to many Pokemon. It's often as simple as including Toxic, which in many ways is almost the ultimate coverage move. Who needs to worry about whether to run Hidden Power Ice or Grass Zapdos when Toxic gets just about everything it needs? This is of course a simplification, but one with a great deal of truth. Heatran often operates on a similar premise. It's why defensive Pokemon find so much success with it as well. They're not offensively invested. They can hardly fit in attacking moves with all the utility they're focused on. Yet they're regularly threatening and dishing out damage on par with most actual attackers because of Toxic's coverage. Or if not Toxic, similar moves like Will-O-Wisp, Leech Seed, and phasing moves alongside hazards. Sometimes simply using Taunt to prevent the opponent from healing is better than any coverage move. Heatran is again a superb example of this, as it's why Chansey can't reliably take it on despite taking little direct damage from every damaging move in Heatran's arsenal. These are of course complementary tactics to the damaging moves on offensive Pokemon that are the primary focus of this video. Coverage is an undeniably key part of the game, both super effective and neutral. Something like Garchomp's dual stab is so fearsome specifically because it's hitting nearly everything for neutral damage, which is all it needs alongside its power. However, sometimes there will come a Pokemon that takes on such a combination, be it Skarmory, Celesteela, or even Togekiss. Garchomp does have the coverage options to hit them super effectively, but would it be at its best if it included them in its moveset? Ultimately, that's up to you to decide. Depending on the metagame, your team, your playstyle, really just whatever you might feel on any given Sunday, you might decide that your Garchomp needs Aqua Tail or that your Latios needs Ice Beam because Gliscor poses a threat to one of your other team members, or just because it really irritates you, as Gliscor does. It will serve you well to keep in mind though that there are other ways around the threat besides going straight for the most super effective coverage option. And thank you so much to our Platinum patrons. Thank you to Amphozenus, Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Daniel Isbeast, Corman, Eric Dissing, Funky, Glitcherton, Howl, Jack G, King Yabber, Nightfall, Megamon VGC, Mojo Game Slayer, Nurse Jake, One Penguin to Rule, Pretzel SP, Seagulls Incorporated, Sojiro Sakura, Spavoon, Skylaria, Soras and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, Stoneface Colin, Tyler, Kiboflu, Wardeen, Zathor for their major support of our videos.